So what I'm doing right now is putting a line of permanent marker down. And this is one of those Sharpies, permanent, fine point. And this is actually something that I'm going to use to show the opacity of the paint. So you'll get a sense of the viscosity and the tea, coffee, and cream and how they have different effects on the paper. So I'm going to draw in some boxes. And we're going to do tea, coffee, and cream. And we're going to use, I'm going to show my palette. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. And we're going to use our ochre. We're going to use the yellow earth color in the Hemi palette. And I'm taking it right from the Hemi palette. And right from the Hemi palette is cream. If I add a little bit of water to what's in the Hemi palette, I get coffee. Now, if you notice, the paint is getting more transparent. And that's what happens when you start to add water. And then I'm going to do tea. And that's when I add a lot of water to the Hemi paint. So we're going to talk about brush wetness and the terminology that watercolor artists and gouache artists use. The first term is sopping wet. And sopping wet means that your brush has a bead on it, a bead of water. And we're going to lay it down on this area just to show you what that looks like. And you can see it's actually running down my page. It's sopping wet. So generally we don't use a sopping wet mark when we paint because it's too out of control. It lifts up the bottom's layers. The second term is wet. And when what people mean by wet is you wash your brush out and then you wipe it on the lip of the container. And you can do it once. I tend to do it twice. So this is wet. And all of a sudden you see that this is a little more control. It doesn't bleed out along the edges. It's a little narrower. And that is wet. Damp is you put your brush in, you tap it on the edge, but then you also use something like a rag and you're going to dry it out a little bit. So this is damp. And finally, there's moist. And moist is you tap it on the edge, you dry it a few times. You can even squeeze out the water from the brush and you have moist. And each one of these brush wetness has a different width that it makes, where the sopping wet is much wider, the wet is narrower, and so on and so on. So the most control you have is with a moist brush.